This is urgent. The Israeli state has put a target on the backs of the 6 remaining Palestinian journalists in northern Gaza and 6 of the last surviving Palestinian journalists remaining in Gaza full stop. They're all Al Jazeera journalists and they've played a pivotal role in reporting on some of the worst crimes and atrocities committed in our age. And that is exactly why the Israeli state wants them dead. The Israeli Defense Forces, so-called, have tweeted out that these 6 journalists are terrorists. They claim to have documents saying they're Hamas, Islamic Jihad, claiming these documents serve as proof of the integration of Hamas terrorists within the Qatari Al Jazeera media network. And no, Israel has been waging a ceaseless and remorseless war on Al Jazeera, attempting to ban, of course, all of its reporting, because Al Jazeera is one of the only media networks which has actually shown the reality of Israel's genocide. They specifically claim that Al Jazeera journalists here have spearheaded the propaganda for Hamas, especially in northern Gaza. This is a key point, actually. We'll come on to that. Now, 2 of them are Anas al-Sharif and Hossam Shabat, whose content has been engaged with by many millions of people across multiple media platforms all over the world. Now, bear in mind that since 7th of October 2023, the Israeli state has perpetrated the biggest slaughter of journalists in recorded history. Many of these journalists have been slaughtered in their beds, sometimes alongside most or their entire families, including children, including their babies. At the same time, the Israeli state has banned foreign journalists from entering Gaza. As Alex Crawford from Sky News said last December, international journalists have been deliberately blocked from entering Gaza by primarily Israel, who doesn't want them seeing the war crimes. On the spearing of these journalists, here is some context. As the Committee to Protect Journalists says in a statement, the Committee to Protect Journalists is aware of the accusations made by the Israel Defense Forces against several journalists in Gaza, accusing them of being members of militant groups. Israel has repeatedly made similar unproven claims without producing credible evidence. After killing Al Jazeera correspondent Ismail al-Ghul in July, the IDF previously produced a similar document which contained contradictory information showing that al-Ghul, born in 1997, received a Hamas military ranking in 2017 when he would have been 10 years old. It is worth recalling that Israel's war against journalists long predates the current onslaught against Gaza, and indeed, back in May 2022, the Israeli state shot and killed Shireen Abu Akleh, a Palestinian-American journalist. They claimed initially it was Palestinian militants to blame. Months later, when attention, of course, had moved elsewhere, they admitted they were responsible. Now, as I say, Hossam Shabat is one of the journalists targeted. He's done incredible work exposing war crimes and atrocities, risking his life every single day. Many of his colleagues, his close friends among them, have been butchered by the Israeli state and he's had to bury them. He says in a statement, Israel's army has released fabricated dossiers framing us, the last remaining journalists in North Gaza, reporting on Israel's extermination and ethnic cleansing campaign, as terrorists. This blatant and belligerent attempt to transform us, the last witnesses in the north, into killable targets is an assassination attempt, an obvious attempt to preemptively justify our murder. We would like to remind everyone that after murdering our colleague Ismail al-Ghul, Israel released a document that claimed he supposedly received a military ranking on July the 1st, 2007, when he would have been a 10-year-old child. This public threat was made without any evidence and is part of a systematic propaganda campaign to justify the unjustifiable as Israel continues to target civilians in Gaza, including doctors, aid workers, children, and us journalists. We call on our colleagues and media institutions around the world to show their solidarity with us. Despite these dangerous and untrue threats made against us, we remain committed to our profession and will continue to report the facts on the ground as the genocide, regretfully, continues unabated. Now, it's very clear what's going on here. Shabat says these are the last witnesses in the north, and Israel has cut off communications in the north. They imposed a total siege on the north from the beginning of this month, preventing food, water, medicine, all the essentials of life from getting in. They waged a ceaseless war against hospitals whilst wiping civilian infrastructure off the face of the earth and driving the desperately traumatised, hungry, maimed, injured survivors from northern Gaza, whilst detaining many to send them to camps where we know from overwhelming reports there is mass torture, including several detainees who were tortured to death, as well as rape and gang rape. At the same time, the ruling Likud party in Israel has organised a big conference in support of ethnically cleansing Gaza and colonising it with illegal settlements. That's what's happening here. They're now trying to clear northern Gaza of all Palestinian life and Palestinian existence to settle it for the state of Israel. And that's why they need to silence anyone still there reporting on the atrocities being committed in this genocidal onslaught. Now, the Israeli state are helping to facilitate this crime. The Yedioth Aharonoth newspaper headline is IDF exposes 6 Al Jazeera journalists as Gazan terrorists, while Emmanuel Fabian, the British-Israeli military correspondent of the Times of Israel, posts this IDF propaganda on his Twitter feed. I would note that this journalist served in the IDF, so he's a former soldier in an army which is currently committing some of the worst war crimes of our time, while sharing official Israeli propaganda, which is smearing Palestinian journalists as combatants, that propaganda from Israel, an attempt to have them killed. Well, journalists such as him need to be held to account because he is clearly there helping to legitimise that propaganda and putting those courageous Palestinian journalists in danger. I'd also know that several Israeli journalists are currently serving soldiers. As an anti-Zionist Israeli account who I follow religiously puts it, he's got the punchy Twitter handle @IReHateYou, could not recommend following him more. He says an Israeli journalist was wounded whilst taking part as an army reservist in the invasion of a foreign country, that's Lebanon. Remember that the next time they try to bullshit you with Palestinian journalists are Hamas, Israeli journalists being soldiers. He's referring here to Chaim Goldich, who is, and I'm not shitting you here, a correspondent for the Israeli Public Broadcasting Corporation, or Kan, the Israeli equivalent of the BBC. In another example, there is Avril Block. He has posted a video of an utterly destroyed village, completely apocalyptic footage, showing the total ruin of clearly civilian infrastructure at the hands of the Israeli military. He tweets alongside it, "That's how my battalion left the village they fought in, a regiment of real tigers," and then describes his battalion as honourable with the emojis of the Israeli flag and a flexed bicep. We need to make sure we remember the names of all of these people, these soldiers, so if they try to enter our countries, we can do everything we can to prosecute them for war crimes. This individual clearly there confessing to war crimes. I want to say one final thing here. The failure of the vast majority of Western journalists to speak out about the biggest slaughter of journalists in history is disgusting. It makes me nauseous. I have nothing but contempt for these people. My industry is a cesspit. Now, you know perfectly well, and you know what I'm talking about. Many of these hacks think they're courageous when they turn out some bile about whichever voiceless, vulnerable minority is flavour of the month to get a kicking from mainstream media outlets, and then they get called out online and act as though they're being persecuted and attacked. Well, listen, real courage has been shown by the Palestinian journalists of Gaza, the lions of the world's press pack, who have sought to show the world the proof of some of the worst atrocities committed of our age, facilitated as they are by our governments, and who have been slaughtered, maimed, traumatised, and as we see, relentlessly menaced with death every waking second. Western media outlets have overwhelmingly shown minimal solidarity. This is just one crime amongst so many. But let's be clear, there are some journalists in the West and Israel who voluntarily made themselves complicit in a crime. There will be a reckoning. Complicity in genocide and public incitement of genocide are crimes. They are criminalised by the 1948 Genocide Convention, which nations like the US and Britain, and Israel for that matter, have put on their statute books. And those specific journalists in Israel and elsewhere should be pursued to the day they die by legal means, to face legal accountability for their role in the mass slaughter of the Palestinian people. The Palestinian journalists of Gaza, meanwhile, must be protected, their courage rightly celebrated. We must do all we can to demand our governments and our media outlets speak out and stop their Israeli ally from wiping every last journalist out. Please like and subscribe, leave your thoughts and your comments. That means more people will engage with this content, which is what this is all about, really, isn't it? Help us keep the show on the road and take on the media which has facilitated genocide at patreon.com/OJ84. Listen to the podcast. I'll speak to you soon.